delivery of basic services is better. So I think we must recognize the fact that the problems of South Africa, you see, one of the things that Jacob Zuma has done is to make people believe that the only problem is corruption. Actually, 53% of citizens in South Africa are living below the poverty line. Young people are unemployed. Unemployment in South Africa constitutes 9 million South Africans. So I think we mustn't kid ourselves into believing that we're only dealing with a corruption problem. We are dealing with a South African problem. And I believe, just like I shared even today, for the purposes of Africa, we need to see South Africa also go to a post-liberation movement era. If it doesn't do that, democracy will not work because one-party states simply are not sustainable. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mmusi, okay, journalist. I listened to your speech and came across as a bit neutral for someone who's basically taking to a position. I'm far more interested in getting your views about Botswana as a democracy, giving us examples of really where do you think we are as a democracy, especially one of the oldest running democracies in Africa.
Look, I mean, I'm the host of the UDC. I came to support their work. I think like any other democracy, if it remains in the hands of a singular party, it has dangers. There is already profound evidence of issues of corruption that we must be challenged. Botswana's unemployment levels are at levels that are incongruous with the resource deposits that are here. So as it comes to the question, I really believe that post the Khama era and the current state that is in place, we need to see a democratic change. Democracy is best tested when you can see power from one ruling party to an opposition party without violence or intimidation. Until that takes place, you can say you are democratic by virtue of the fact that you held elections, but you can't really say that test has been approved. The state of the media, as we've been reflecting earlier on, the news that come out of Botswana aren't always covering of the opposition. No, that's an undermining of the very essence of democratic processes. You must ensure, if you talk about what is the success of democracy, it's electoral, it's institutional, in the sense that you want independent media, you want to ensure that the media can communicate freely with the opposition, make sure all of those issues are covered. You want to eradicate capture of government by making sure that no one can enrich themselves personally through corruption, and that institutions of government work well. In many ways, I've also been liaising with our legal department to ensure that the judiciary continues to function well. So these are issues that I think going forward, the opposition has to champion, and I think that the greatest test for democracy in Botswana is coming in 2019. I'll let the chair check.
Sir, yeah, my name is Lau Leonel from Yarnafa. To what extent would you say there is a sense of maturity in opposition politics in terms of holding government to power in Botswana?
I mean, I believe without doubt it's completely admirable. And it's something that takes a lot of work. It takes courageous leadership, the leadership of all the respective parties that are here. I think it's profoundly important. You know, when you look at democracy in the region, in SADC, the MDC were in fact in Zimbabwe working through a similar process. Kenya, there was a similar process. When you look at even in South Africa, the governments that have been in place in local government are through coalitions and opposition parties working together. The removal of Jacob Zuma was a function of opposition parties working in tandem to say, when we go for this court action, we work together. So I think what is happening here is historic, it is significant, and it demonstrates to me profound, to use your word, maturity, but I think it's consistent with global practice. You see, in Africa, we've gotten used to parties getting 67%. When you go to Rwanda, the percentage is even rising. That is not healthy for democracy. If you study democracies all over the world, actually, changes of power is healthy, but also that coalitions are the way of the future because accountability is best effected within that space. And I do think more than anything, what I also draw away is an inspiration. I'm taking it back home, even in South Africa, to say, the parties that we deal with, can we have a discussion about how we are going to work these things? Because, in fairness, you are now projecting the future of Botswana's politics. If you invest your time trying to correct yesterday, yesterday by its very essence has very deeply divisive elements to it. But the future is something we can all contribute to. So the parties that are here today all have different heritage and strands. To bring them all together is a profoundly powerful thing, because actually many countries can achieve that. But more equally to that, they're working towards a future to say, this is the Botswana we want to see. And I was inspired by the president's words that, look, let's ensure we create work, 100,000 jobs in the time period. That's an inspiring rallying call for all the people to come together. And all the economic policy that will support them, to me, demonstrates a much brighter future for Botswana. Because trust me, having dealt in the continent, political parties that remain in power, as the ANC likes to say in South Africa, until Jesus comes back, all, regardless of who leads them, end up in essence capture, they focus on the elite, and in fact they don't serve the people in the long run.
Colleagues, let's agree that 2 more questions. I'm very sorry about that. Only 2 questions, please. I just have what Spanito.
Oh, yes.
Mine is a very quick one. Where is Helen Zille and how can you describe your relationship with her?
Helen Zille runs the Western Cape government. She does not serve in party activity, because we separate party and state. There's a very important distinction. I don't operate in a world of cadre deployment. I don't sit back and say, we will hire this person to go there. We want competent governments that account to us as a political party. So Helen Zille is doing that, and she relates to me as her leader in the organization. She serves as part of our governance unit, and she comes forward. So I really do think, from that perspective, it demonstrates the fact that in the DA there's profound maturity in saying our governments work together, they deliver for the people, and that's what she's currently engaged with. That's a service, and she'll work until 2019, as is what is within the framework of the South African electoral cycle.
Last question, colleagues. Last question. Okay. I want to put the film on Lucian. Lucian. Okay.
No, this one
By the way, Philemon Mmusi is the president of the Union Media Botswana.
Oh!
So, give me the pay. So that's why I'm so that I don't know.
There's no union that's ever fired. Unions are forever, they are demanding more, they must demand more. Right?
I just wanted to know, what is your take on coalition government? We have seen in the past, in other countries, that coalition government has not been doing well. What is your take on coalition government? Do you think it's a good way, or that parties like UDC should actually merge and just have one party?
Look, I'm not going to, as to what the model is going to be going forward, whether you form a unitary party or not, that's a decision for Congress to resolve. Suffice to say that I think coalitions in fact work. We are modeling that very same process even in Johannesburg, Tshwane, Nelson Mandela Bay, where coalitions work well. In this instance, the parties have not collapsed their identities, but the South African system allows you to do that. It's a proportional representative system, so each party contributes in that way. But what is important to understand is that you must decide that what unites you can't just be the removal of the government. What unites you must be a program of government, regardless of how you are configured. Because if you don't have a program of government, you could feel quite naturally that once you get into government, you've achieved all your outcomes. Then what is your purpose? Whereas if you've got a program of government, 100,000 jobs, then every party must contribute to achieving that. If you've got a program of government that says you are going to focus on social welfare or the delivery of quality education for young people, then you must approach it that way. And I think actually, global experience is such that it helps. Germany has got a very thriving coalition movement. It takes a long time to negotiate, but once the negotiations are in place, we'll proceed. The Netherlands does likewise. I think you'll discover that the UK will go into a coalition system fairly soon, because I think, as you saw now, even the Conservatives are joining. Those are European examples. I think when you come to Africa, you'll see very clearly that in fact when parties come together, they work together towards an achievement of particular goals. The lessons for us as Africans not only must be a question of what happens in Europe, we must also look at Latin America, where you've also found that coalition movements in conditions similar to ours, where there are high levels of unemployment, high levels of inequality, they come together, they work together. I think the future of both countries, Botswana and South Africa, are coalition governments in whatever way they are configured, for ultimately we can then not only, as the President so correctly articulated, critical analysis of what is happening. You can then interrogate yourself, you can question yourself, but ultimately you are accountable to the election. My experience is that even for the DA's perspective, it's been very helpful to be in a coalition, because it's asked us some difficult questions. It's asked us to introspect so that we produce a much better outcome. If you don't have that as a one-party state, you can look after Jacob Zuma for 9 years, and then when he's gone, you say, you still can't tell him what he's done. Thank you very much.